Right then. Test, 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 test. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Seems like it's fine. Okay. Take 2. Take 13. Take. Well, we'll do this in as many takes as it needs because this is important for me anyway. Well, so hello there. You probably don't know who I am, but that's perfectly fine because this is mostly important for me to put it out there to kind of like catalog or like keep a record of like this important moment in time where I'm not particularly fond of this subject. I'm not particularly fond of talking about this. It feels like I'm putting myself in a very vulnerable position, as I have been for the past few months. But I think it's important for me to kind of like remember this day as like, well, this past few months as like something that will forever be the changing point, the point where I make a difference in my life. Or maybe I don't, and maybe everything is just downhill from here. But I want to at least remember that this is when I make the big decision. So, what am I talking about? So I'm just gonna go out there and say, for the past few months, I have not been in a very good mental state. One might even say I may have been very depressed for the past few months. And it's really hard for me to kind of like process or even like think about how depressed I am without then becoming more depressed. I think that's like a very common thing where you kind of sometimes try to push back your thoughts of like you're potentially depressed only for it to compound and maybe build up over time. But then when you try to address the depression, you start self-analyzing yourself too much, and then you start thinking like, is there any way for me to not be depressed? And in some cases, maybe you'll be able to seek out help and seek out advice and get counseling, and maybe your friends and your family can help you out with that. For me in particular, the more I thought about how depressed I am, the more I feel helpless in my own situation. And the more I feel like there's really no hope, no change, and nothing of the sorts. But that couldn't be more wrong. But it took me a really long time to kind of figure that out as to why I think I feel that way. And as to why now I'm making this video and telling the whole entire world, well, depends on how many people actually see this video, but telling a lot of people and trying to reaffirm with myself and everything that I know that this is where I am and how deeply unhappy I am with my current situation and how it almost not end well for me and potentially not ending up where we are at right now. So, for a little bit of context, hi there, I am Dai, or as I am known at on the internet space, the angry content guy, or as some people keep telling me, it's spelled the angry content guy. Don't know why that's relevant to this conversation, but who knows? I'm currently 27 years old. I'm Vietnamese. That would be important later, trust me. And I'm at a crossroad in my life where I don't really know what I want to be doing and how I should go about approaching finding direction for myself through that process. It's a bit of a weird one to kind of like tell people like, you know, you're so and so age or so and so ethnicity and you kind of like don't know what you want to do. And the question is very hard to answer of like what I should be doing, where I should be taking my life direction at, and like when you bring age into it, it becomes this whole entire thing of like I have a time limit of like when things like when I'm sorry to like use profanity here, but when shit hits the fan, I don't really know for sure how to kind of handle that kind of like thinking. And I think for the longest time, I've just always constantly like in the back of my head just thought like there's I'm reaching a point where I have no clue as to what I want to be doing. I have no clue as to how I can stabilize my life and find like a calling for myself. And I also have no clue how to even go about doing the most basic fundamental thing of like sorting myself out and finding out what I want to be doing. Because a lot of times I feel like what I want to be doing doesn't seem realistic. And that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with, where you think to yourself, like, sure, you're passionate about this, but it's like, what you're pursuing a realistic thing for you to be pursuing as a person? Is it not gonna, you know, potentially like break you in some kind of way where because you blindly follow your passion into something and you don't you don't really fully realize like passion alone doesn't get you very far, and eventually you find yourself feeling like your passion has misled you or something like that. Never got to that point, by the way, because I always stop before the point of like my passion takes over and I pursue something like that. I always get to the point where it's like I feel passionate about something and I want to pursue it, and then what happens afterwards, it's like I have this deep conversation both inside my head and in real life where I have to grasp with this reality of like maybe that's not a realistic option for me to be pursuing, and it's unrealistic of me to think that my passion can like um translate and carry through beyond like what my initial kind of like impressions are, and it will be like the driving force that allows me to like have that motivation and have that direction in life and take me to bigger and potentially better places. Never get to that point. I always just kind of stop and then I kind of have to like reground myself and I rethink what other options I have. And what typically happens is like all those other options don't really lead me anywhere, and I just feel like I'm just doing it for the sake of like just saying, okay, so I've done this, what now? And it always comes back to me feeling like a deep sense of regret of how I think maybe sometimes I should have taken risks. Maybe sometimes I should have been more impulsive and more passionate and taken that kind of like feeling more seriously, and maybe try to make something out of it. Because at the very least, I can say that sure, like my passion didn't pan out and something is along those lines, but at the very least, I did what I thought I wanted to do, or what I believe I love to be doing in the future, and become like something of like a career for me, a job for me, a way for me to sustain myself that I feel like I could be proud of. But no, I don't ever do that. I always take the safe option, or the option that feels the most realistic within my environment and for the people around me. And I think that's another conversation I want to bring up as well. So, regarding the whole Vietnamese thing, a bit of a shocking call out to all my other Vietnamese people out there, but I'm not particularly a fan of my upbringing within Vietnam and the environment that I was in. Well, not particularly to say like I had a bad upbringing or like my environment was like screwed up or anything. It's not like that. I think I generally have. I need to admit to myself, I have a very like I'm in a very privileged position to have like the things that I have, the resources that I have, and the opportunities that I was granted. Thanks in no small part to like the hard work of like my own family and my parents, and how they have allowed me to come to this point and come this far. However, I'd never feel like, well, to be more precise, I don't really think I've I've had like the most satisfying experience growing up in Vietnam. not in the sense of like how I grew up, but in the sense of like how I was molded to grow up. If you can kind of follow me with this one here. So kind of a little bit of a gist and a basis to it and all and everything. Growing up as a kid in Vietnam, one of the things that I feel like was the defining feature of what made me who I am within the family unit and within society and just anywhere else was how well, and this is like talking about like as a kid and everything, not like as an adult, because I totally skipped that stage altogether. But as a kid, I always felt like the things that defined who I am and how other people view me was always how well and how well I did in school and the academic achievements that came along with it. I think there was always a very big emphasis on like what my performance in school and how it reflects me as a person, how it reflects my future prospect as an individual, and how that feeds into how my peers viewed me, my teachers viewed me, how my family viewed me, and how society kind of views me as well. And for the most part, I never realized, well, I always felt pressured by the academic system and like schooling in Vietnam, but I never fully realized how deeply like it affected the way I think and the way I process what satisfaction and like self-achievement and like self-actualization kind of is, because it warped my understanding of like, so if I want people to respect me and if I want my future prospect to be, in like a good place, and I want to secure a future for myself, I need to do well in school. Like that's supposed to be a one-to-one like correlation or like causation even, is how I felt about that kind of like being in that kind of environment. That's how I think I felt like that's how I was raised. And for the longest time, I never really questioned it. Well, I definitely didn't enjoy it, but I never really questioned it on any deeper level than just like, school is hard, like doing things at school, and like, how back in the day when I started middle school, we were going to school like 6 days a week. So we would go on Saturday as well, but we usually have school in the morning, and then in the afternoon we don't have school. But what would typically happen in like school settings or like going into education in Vietnam was like you would find yourself going to school a lot. But beyond that, you also were expected. Yes, there's an expectation of you to also take on extra classes. I'm not talking about extracurricular classes. I'm talking about extra classes that helps bolster what you're learning in class already. And sometimes that's to help with the people or the ones that are falling behind in class and they might need that little help that usually you won't be able to get in class. Or sometimes which is another way of like looking at extra classes back in the day, was like, is the way to like stay ahead of the curve, like stay ahead of like all the learning material that we're learning and maybe learn something extra outside of it, so that we're always on top of like what we're doing in class and we're never falling behind. So that just means that everyone's performance is just generally better that way, because we're always sitting ahead. We're never falling behind it by any capacity. For the longest time, that was just the norm for me. Like there was nothing like different or like new or like aggravating about it. I generally thought that was just how it was like. I grew up like that. Like I had that even in elementary school when I was still going to school 5 days a week for mostly the entire day. But once middle school hit, and like there was like this serious transition between elementary school and middle school where I thought, well, I definitely felt like there was just a sharp turn for me at a time where I thought like, I think genuinely back in elementary school, I think I really enjoyed going to school and like learning stuff. Like there was actually like a small part of me, like as a young child, where I kind of enjoyed it. I didn't really have like the best of experience in terms of like making friends and all that. I've always been like a very odd, quirky kid out, but at the very least, it's like I think going to school and learning new stuff. I kind of really always enjoyed that, and even back during extra classes in elementary school, I always liked learning new things, and sometimes asking the teacher who was teaching us in the extra classes to like, hey, I got this book and all these materials. Can you teach me this stuff from here? And sometimes it would be genuinely really fun for me. And even though I was like, going to school from like 7 in the morning to like 5 in the afternoon, and then going to extra classes potentially on the same day from like 6 to like 8 in the evening, it was just so wild to me how that was a schedule that I had as a kid in elementary school, and I never doubted or questioned it because because what do? Do you just rebel and question what the heck was going on there? And it wasn't exclusive to just the weekdays either. Like we would do that exclusively. Like we wouldn't just do that exclusively on weekdays. On weekends as well, I would be taking extra classes and other things. That was also when I learned English. Back in elementary school, I went to like an English like class, like group, like whatever the heck you call it, during the weekends, and that's how I got my start learning English. Kind of like where I am now. Uh, Aside from that, it's it was weird. So what was I talking about? Oh yeah, so the transition between elementary school and middle school, it was weird to kind of like look at it now, looking it back at it now retrospectively, and thinking like, wow, the transition between going from fifth grade to sixth grade, it's absolutely mind blowing how sharp of a turn the difficulty level kind of like increases when you do that. Like in elementary school, I felt like everything was easy, like the pacing was fine. Like sometimes, like a lot of times, even when in the extra classes, we were learning more material than we were in class, which was perfectly fine. I think that was okay. Or maybe I'm just jaded by it and I didn't really like think too hard about it. But everything we were learning in class, we could follow in class, and we were able to like keep up in class. Some people couldn't, but some people are slower than others. That's perfectly fine. But in middle school, the sense of like what you were learning in class and how what you were only getting out of class only did not allow you to fundamentally keep up with everything that was going on. It was wild to me how it not really advanced, but just how like shocking, like, because you go into class and you expect like what you learn in class, and if you pay attention in class, you should be able to keep up with the class now, right? Well, no, not really, because I kind of come to the realization like we're going through this thick ass freaking textbook, and each teacher sometimes has only like a 45 to 90-minute time slot with us per subject, depending on the subject. By the way, some subject like maths or like literature or like English can get like 2 slots at the same time, so it's like from 45 minutes per slot to like 2 slots as 90 minutes, that kind of thing. And the things that we go through in terms of material within like a 45-minute sort of like single like section of it, it's not enough for you to like catch on with like what the heck is going on, because the material took such a sharp difference. It's like in elementary school you learn the basics, in middle school you were supposed to have the basics, which makes sense, and then you expand upon it in a way where I felt like it didn't feel like it was a natural progression from where we learned like the original basic material from. If you get what I'm saying, it's super weird for me to like say it without like having proper examples of it, but that was just how I felt at the time, because I just had a really like traumatizing, like shocking experience around the time when I transitioned in middle school, and I never really want to think back on it because I feel like I would get very depressed thinking about it, because I was depressed at the time. The shocking transition made me so mentally depressed. I stopped kind of like at a certain point wanting to like speak Vietnamese, like communicate with people in my class or in my teacher. I would just stay quiet. Like the teacher would call my name and I would just stand up and I wouldn't say a single word. I would just be in a daze. And the teacher laughed it off at the beginning, and they were just like, What is this bloody idiot just standing there and not saying a word?" Like I asked him to like stand up and read this material, but I was just like, I was just in a daze. I just couldn't follow what the hell was going on, and like what what they were saying or like everything, and it just caused like this discourse within me and like within my life as well, where I didn't really feel like I belonged in that environment. And it was just like a me versus them kind of deal. Like it got really bad, like to the point where I did not pay attention in class at all, and the teacher more or less, they harped on me for it and told me that I should be better and all that. And that's when like the extra classes just started piling in. Like it was piling in. Like I was signing up or made forced to sign up to so many of those, and every single one of them, I had to make sure that I was doing well in them so that I could do well in class and not be seen as a failure. And is at that point of like failure that really kind of like struck a chord with me of like how I came to the realization like my worth, no matter where I went, while I was in Vietnam, my worth at the time as a kid, as a teenager, and like 13 years old back in the day, my worth was tied to how well I did in class. Because if I did not do well in class, the teacher would just outright call my family and just make a whole big fuss fucking deal about it. And it was intimidating because you kind of think like what happens in class and what happens in school kind of like, stays there. It's like its own separate environment, because it almost feels like whenever you go to school, you're in a separate environment with like different people, and like it doesn't feel like quite like home. And then when you go back to your home, like you get that the kind of like escape from like school. But that wasn't really the case, because you had homework to do. We had a lot of homework to do. We covered like 12 plus subjects, probably even more than that, to be fair, during like school, and we're expected to keep up with all the homework that comes along with that, and we're expected to do all of that on top of like going to school 6 days a week, taking extra classes maybe up to 6 days a week, maybe even more depending on how bad you did. I was really bad, so I probably did a lot, and I don't want to remember it because I probably went to extra classes more times a week than I would like to count. And it's very depressing for me to think about that. And then for your performance to then be fed back to like your family and your parents having this expectation of you being like, you need to do well in school. Like, you need to get this shit right. Because if I don't, I will be at the receiving end of the punishment that befall upon me for not being a good son and a good student. And yeah, I think like as a kid, living in constant fear at that age of like, I don't do well at school and the word gets back to my family would be so freaking furious with me. Like, I'm talking brooms, I'm talking throwing out my toys, a bit of a weird one to say there, but and just in general, just like screaming into my face, telling me I need to do better. I need to do good. If you get what I mean. I'll just be perfectly fair. I think it's like they just want me to like be average and not be like the most exceptional out there. I suppose that's fair enough. Like, as long as I don't get into trouble into school and I just do averagely fine, it was okay. But it was just so hard for me at the time because the transition, like I said, traumatized me a little bit, and I just never adapted properly well. Like, they don't give you the time to adapt. Like, you just kind of have to adapt and just kind of have to keep up with everything that's going on. And as I mentioned before, I had this thing where I just stopped speaking to people. Well, technically speaking, I stopped speaking in Vietnamese a little bit. Not really a lot. Like, at home, I still speak it. At school, I speak it minimally. Maybe sometimes, like, my classmate would talk to me. I would, say a few words here and there. But never, well, sometimes maybe if I got really well with them, there might have been, like, more conversation to it. But for the most part, I never felt comfortable speaking Vietnamese. Like, Vietnamese to me, at that time, because of how like oppressive and how intimidating it was, like learning everything in Vietnamese and how the material was being delivered to me, it felt like such a villain to me. It felt like such a force of like, not evil, maybe a bit of a harsher word, but I definitely think it definitely didn't sit well with me, and it definitely made me feel like disconnected with my own culture and like my own language sometimes. And that was kind of like around the time when I started speaking a lot of English, mostly to myself. I was that kid in school where I talked to myself a lot. At home, I would talk to myself in the mirror because I didn't really want to talk to anyone, because anytime we bring up a conversation, it would always be about school. And I don't want to talk about school. I just didn't want to talk about it. I wasn't doing well. I wasn't a good kid. I didn't want to do my homework like most kids do. But there's this expectation that you have to do well. You have to do your homework. You have to perform. You have to, you know, you have to be well, you have to be normal. It's like normal. What does that mean? Be normal. And I think that was something that was always a point in conversation that always comes up, of like, because it always gets mentioned in conversation I have with my family and my parents in particular, where they would always bring up like, so, you know, like they would say like, so my friend who has a kid that goes to the same school as you, they're doing fine. They're doing pretty good. They just got this score and this score. Like, they are top of their class. And they would mention that a lot of times. They would mention it across a multitude of different other kids. They would say how polite they are, how nice they are, and how, you know, how put together they are. And I'm just like, why are you comparing me to all these people? Like, what do you want from me? Like, where's the line? Like, what is it that you want from me in particular by telling me this? It's like, yeah, I get it. They're doing well. They're probably pretty polite and nice, and, you know, like they seem to keep together. I don't know. I never met most of these people, so I can't really say for sure. But what was the point of bringing it up in conversation only to make me feel worse about myself? Is what I've come to realize now. Because back then I just kind of like ignored it, took it by the chin, or just felt like it was an unnecessary conversation point, and I just didn't want to process it or didn't want to acknowledge it at all. Which is good on me for not acknowledging that. Kind of sad that it's still something that I take with me to this day, where I feel like the general feeling of like comparison between one person and another is done in a way where it's meant to like put you down and make you feel inferior or lesser because you're not like behaving in a certain way and you're not normal. And yeah, I guess I'm not normal. I'm not. I'm a fucking Vietnamese kid who, during middle school, kind of stopped trying to speak in Vietnamese and kind of just was ostracized in class. And I'd talk to myself in English a lot, which is why now I'm really good at English. Because for me, it was an escape. It was raw escapism from the thing that oppressed me to the thing that I generally felt I was having fun with. Like the convo I had with myself, the funny convos I had with myself. I can't remember most of them, but some of them were really funny. Like I would play out like cartoon character scenarios and try to like make myself feel better, and you know, it was fun. It was like living a little fantasy in your head, whilst all the noise and all the stress was constantly harping on me and trying to make me feel worse and worse and worse. It was just how it is. And that was kind of like the environment I grew up in. The one thing about that environment, that despite like all the like negative aspects of it that I kind of talked about, the other like side to like the coin is like it built up this expectation within me, which I'm gonna feed into now, of like where I am right now. Of just like the expectation that it built up within me is that it kind of made me think like, and because it's just so hammered in my head, it kind of made me think like, if I just do well in any academic setting, that means that everything will pan out now, right? Everything will work out for me in the future. I will have a good life. I will be happy. All I have to do is just do well. Well, I never really did well, to be perfectly honest. I just kind of floated a little bit until like after I graduated high school and had my like first experience sort of like studying abroad. My first time studying abroad was in the UK. I wanted to do psychology because I thought it was interesting. Like to me, like the whole concept of like understanding other people and trying to like figure myself out was like a very interesting process to me. And I really wanted to like get into that. What I never realized was like studying psychology reveals more about yourself than you're comfortable knowing, and it reveals more about aspects of your life and other people that you never think of before, but it kind of rewires your thinking about certain things. So it was a very revealing experience for me, being able to self-reflect on my life, and with the resources of like what I was learning in psychology, I was incapable then at the time to, better assess myself, better like see like kind of like my circumstances, better to like, formulate like, oh, so this was not really healthy for me, but I suppose like I can't really do anything about it because it's kind of too late now. I guess I just have to like, try to do better from now on, and like kind of like reflecting on my own past experience of like, wow, all this studying really amounted to freaking nothing. Because that's the thing as well with like the education system that I grew up in. If like it's a lot of academics, but none of the academics translate into real world skills. It was nothing. All the math, all the literature, all the like science, like biology, chemistry, physics, like none of those felt like it translated to anything of like real world worth. It's like unless you're going to like a specialized field in one of those subjects, and it is the core something you need, it never like became a useful aspect of my life. Like all that time wasted, all that time wasted at school and all that time wasted in extra classes just to like keep up at school and do well in school never amounted to anything for me going forward into real life. And some people might say like, it teaches you like in order to like achieve something, you need to put in the hard work, which I agree. I just wish the hard work wasn't at the expense of me feeling like shit every day because I wasn't doing well. And the only way I could do well was to like constantly pile on like extra classes for myself, taking away precious personal time that I could potentially do some more self-discovery of myself. Because I was an odd kid. I never fit in, and I never really had time to properly self-discover and like self-assess who I am and how I felt within like my settings and the people and my surroundings and all that thing. I just never really had time for self-reflection. And I genuinely look back at like the experience I had going to the UK and studying psychology as like a positive experience, even though I feel like sometimes the more revealing I found myself, like the more aspects of myself I learned through introspection and through psychology, the more I felt like, wow, I am really just really repressed and depressed. Like I think that was when I generally diagnosed myself with depression around the middle school transition like phase, where it was like I was really depressed and I really didn't have anyone to talk about it with until I learned about it for myself. And then later on I would have more and more these realizations thanks to like that stepping stone. Well, not really a stepping stone, more like the basis of it. It helped me to realize more and more about aspects about myself, about my life, and things that I could be doing or like things I should be thinking about that would help me better inform myself of like what's right for me and what's wrong for me. The sad reality of it is like it never really amounted to anything, the psychology thing. I tried to do psychology. I tried to work in a hospital. I tried to like find like a footing where I can feel like, okay, this is a career path I can take for me, because I spent all that time studying psychology, 4 years in fact. I spent all that time, all that effort. I need to make something out of this. My experience working in psychology and like helping people with their mental health issues, what I learned from my experience was that, one, mental health is so taxing, not only to you, but to the patient, the people who you're working with, and the people you're helping as well. And I had a genuine point throughout that experience where I could not, and I felt very jaded by this, and I felt really ashamed of myself for like thinking like this, of like, I could not care for even the slightest bit what was going to happen to these people who were coming to the hospital, who were coming to my ward, to the ward that I was working in, to get help and seek help for their mental health. And it reached a point where I don't know if it was like stress or like emotional exhaustion or just like the general feeling of like, all these people coming in, like the stream of people that came in every day to get diagnosis, it made you feel like there's just no end to this. There's no difference that we're making. And like the people who are just coming, like they think they're seeking out help, but what essentially happens is like they either get the help or they just don't get the help and they just have to go back to their lives just feeling miserable. And also there was some other stuff as well, but I'm not going to go into that. There's a lot more personal, the other stuff of like, my work environment and like how I felt in that kind of environment with like other people and how that kind of also affected me as well. But the main thing was just like, it just never felt like there was a genuine difference being made. And that made me reach a point where I just stop caring about these people that I'm trying to help, which if you're working in mental health, that is that is a horrible position for you to be in, where you don't care about your patients and you don't care about like what impact you may have in terms of like helping them. Like, and I had to catch myself at that moment of just kind of like reel myself back of like, maybe I'm not cut out for this, because you really need the fortitude to not only help people, but you also like deal with like the surmounting like emotional pressure that comes with like helping these people, but maintaining that sort of like professional relationship where it's like you don't go too deep, but you're still trying your best to like still like, make them feel better, or at least like make their lives better. Like that's the end goal of the day. But if you get to any point where you just don't care and there's just like another face in the crowd, like another passerby, like another person that you just happen to come across in your daily sort of like work cycle, and you're just doing a 9 to 5 every day, just not caring about those smaller aspects and just going in, going out, day in and day out, cycling the same shit over and over again, and feel like, and I do feel like this is a real thing as well, I feel like there was no helping these people, and I don't think they'll ever get better, especially because I was working in a hospital in Vietnam. I just felt like Vietnam in general didn't really have like much of a space or like much of like an appreciation or like an emphasis on mental health. Even though it's like, the sector exists. People are now talking about mental health more in the news, in the media. And, the younger generation, they care more about their mental health. They want to like seek out more resources to like help them figure themselves out and like make informed decision about, their mental well-being. And that's really good. I just don't think it's fully caught up yet. Maybe had I'd like gone into this like maybe like 5 years afterwards, that probably would have been a better spot to be in. But at the time, it just didn't feel like there was much of an impact being made, and I was just going through the grind of working and not helping. But then again, in my position, I wasn't meant to help either. I was like an intern, so I wasn't really meant to help anyone. But it never felt like I really was. Even then, I still felt like I wanted to make some kind of difference, or like at least like get to the bottom of like where all this could be going. And maybe I was expecting too much out of like the experience, like I actually wanted to make a difference. But honestly speaking, I was really emotionally exhausted. I think that was another point in my life where I generally felt depressed as well, where of just like depressed of like the situation of like my work, kind of like work environment, where I felt like no real change was happening, and the same problem would just keep repeating itself over and over again. And also my general lack of care for the people who are coming to the hospital to seek help. I think that is more revealing to me than anything else, that I was not fit for that role. So afterwards, I decided I wasn't gonna continue doing psychology anymore because it wasn't really making me feel good. And yeah, I think from like a professional standpoint, if you're not feeling good working in that field, and you're not really in a good headspace to be helping people, you really shouldn't. So advice to the people out there: if you ever find yourself in that situation, hopefully not. Hopefully you're better off and have better fortitude than me. But yeah. And then what happens after that is like I just started drifting. I just didn't really like. I once again felt like I had no direction in my life of like what I wanted to be doing. it was at that point that I was just like constantly like, well, I'm not gonna mince words. I was definitely like more or less a bum because I just felt zero motivation, zero like drive to like pursue or do anything, and I was just like lazing about and just trying to like exist, and that was it. That was my life for the longest time. That kind of changed though because like, well, around the time when I stopped doing psychology and started wanting to like pursue something else, or like trying to like maybe laze about and then maybe think about time like a bit here and there about what I wanted to be pursuing, COVID hit. COVID hit and everything just stopped, which I felt like now that I look back on it, I should have really like capitalized on COVID a lot more. I should have used that opportunity to like really start reflect more. If anything, COVID should have been the reset button that I used to further explore myself, further introspectively like figure out what I want to be doing and find a direction for myself. What ended up happening was this: I was just a constant bum and just lazing about and just waiting for COVID to pass. That was literally the feeling I had, and it's a shame to think about it now. Like that could have been a point where I could have actually made a genuine difference and actually genuinely think about my future. But the past is the past, and we can't really like go back to it. No point in that. But currently, right now, I've set myself a new direction again. My new direction right now is studying software engineering. I thought long and hard about it. I thought about like the realistic expectation of like what kind of like field of work I could go into. Because, I mean, to be perfectly fair, I didn't really think that hard. My general functioning brain was just like, I'm good with computers. I think I'm relatively moderately good with computers. I thought. I really thought. Like, I literally thought that that was all I need to do well in software engineering was like, be good with computers. No, not that simple. But we'll get to that. But yeah, that was like my dumb, simplified, very uncoordinated thinking of like, I'm good with computers, ergo software engineering should be fine for me. And that's the new direction I set up for myself. And now I'm in Canada trying to study software engineering. And because, I was half-ass about how I went about my approach of like, hey, I'm good with computers, so I should be good with software engineering. You remember that? It didn't pan out well. Well, there were some aspects of it I really enjoyed, like with software engineering. Web design, personally, was like something that I felt really enjoyed. I really enjoyed, and I like the creative aspect of it, of like how like despite it was like heavily like gated behind coding, it's like once you get a grip with like everything that you're learning there, you start to like incorporate your own creativity into things, and it was kind of fun to like build websites and all that. But it didn't really change the fact that software engineering, coming to the realization like I wasn't really enjoying it, and I was just pushing myself through trying to like make it work, because I've set this direction for myself. I should put myself on the course of the direction to try and do this, to try and make a future of it, a career of it. And then it dawned on me, this is the same thing that happened with kind of like psychology. I went into psychology because I just had a genuine interest in people and wanting to find out more about myself. But beyond that, I didn't really have like a good idea of like what psychology entailed. And everything I was learning was new for the first time. To be fair, it was very fun learning everything for the first time. But I definitely should have done my homework more as to like, how difficult and how deep psychology goes. That should have been an actual like thing I should have done. The same with software engineering now. I should have thought about more and think a lot harder about like, what does software engineering entail? What does it mean to study software engineering? Am I good with computers? Or am I just think? Do I just think I just know how to click a few buttons and just make things go, and that's it? Turns out you need to know a lot more than that to be good, to be a good software engineer. You need to understand coding language. You need to kind of have your mind like hardwired to know like when certain codes are meant to be used and when certain conditions are meant to be made and when certain parameters are meant to be like applied. And I think I've hit a wall. I've genuinely hit a wall where I feel like I'm doing it, but I'm not enjoying it. And I also don't think I'm very good at it. I think I'm just average, or maybe subpar average even. I don't even think I'm maybe that good. I have reached a point in my life where I have mindlessly pursued something again without doing my proper due diligence. I've once again put myself in a position where I'm doing this thing for the sake of like having something to do so that I could hopefully figure out a direction for my life and a future career for myself and start feeling a sense of stability, because I'm 27. I'm about to turn 30. And for me, my friend tells me like, I shouldn't be like making that a big deal, like a big point of it. But for me, it feels like a big deal of like, I'm about to turn 30. And I still haven't figured out what I want to be doing for myself. And I'm just constantly stuck in limbo like this, trying to figure out one step at a time. But I feel like whatever step I take like two steps back. One step back from like the learning thing, because, I didn't expect how hard it would be. So the one step I take one step back to kind of like, be humbled by the fact that, wow, this is hard. The second step back I take is trying to like reaffirm for myself that I can do this, I can tough it out, and I can make this work. Sadly, I don't think that's possible anymore. I really don't think that that's going to work. I think I've come to learn to understand like how jaded I am in terms of like how self-satisfaction and self-actualization does not come from like doing well in an academic setting. Something that was drilled into my head from like elementary school to middle school to high school, that idea of like, if you perform well in school, that will translate to you being recognized as a good person, a well-adjusted person, and a person who has value in society and in your family. And I'm not gonna lie, if that's the case, I really am a valueless individual. If you put it like that, I have no value. I have no direction. I have no drive. I'm not excellent in my academic settings. I'm not brilliant in any way. I'm not by any way a standout performer. I'm not even a subpar, like average performer either. I'm just bad. Because I jump into things thinking like it will have an impact in my life. It will change my future. But ultimately, it doesn't. But what do? Do I stop? Do I just give up? Do I just continue and then just once again go back to being like the bum that I was? Well, no, I don't want to be a bum. I don't want to disappoint people any more than I already have. And I definitely don't want to like continue feeling like I just have nothing of worth in my life. So I try to tough it out. And oh boy, did I try. I really tried to tough it out and try to make it work. But eventually I learned that pushing myself like that, especially once I've hit such a wall, repeatedly even as well, like hitting that wall repeatedly, I just realized to myself, like, I really don't want to continue. Like, as in, I don't want to continue existing in this life where I don't feel like I am of any worth, and all my worth just boils down to me feeling like I'm worthless. Now, I don't want to alarm anyone or anything, but within the past few months, as I'm approaching like my last year at college learning software engineering, I really thought about it. I really thought about like how absolutely, utterly helpless and worthless I am in my current situation. How I feel like I wasn't really like living up to my potential and my responsibilities. I felt like I was letting everyone down, friends, family, all the likes. I felt like I was letting myself down. And I genuinely, throughout that whole experience, in the past few months, I have been so unhappy and so depressed. Just thinking about it over and over again. It's wrecked my sleep schedule. It's wrecked my ability to like feel good doing more or less anything, really. Like, I kind of pretend, like I try to put out a tough face and like pretend to like my friends and my family like everything is fine, everything is okay. I am trying and I am giving it my 110%. When in fact, I think I'm just only giving it 50% now because I just don't feel like I can give it 110% because I don't feel like it's gonna lead to anything. And I genuinely contemplated for like the past month whether or not I should just end it all and never have to worry again. Like, everything would just go dark. I don't have to worry. I don't have to stress. I don't have to think about any responsibilities. I don't have to make a big deal about, whether or not the next day is going to be better than the last, because there will be no more next days. That in that defined moment of me finding that one spot, this little river or like water sort of like system that runs through the highway, and there's like this bridge, and then I look underneath that bridge, that dark, dingy spot that you can hardly see, or like you wouldn't even like give 2 cents of, like even like bother to like turn your head and look at it because it's just so out of the way, and just like you have to look down and like just peer into like how dark and utterly depressing that spot look. I really like that spot. I found it near my college. I thought to myself, if I could just end everything there, wouldn't that just be the most fitting place for someone as worthless as me to end up and just put a stop to all my suffering? I don't. As in, I don't think that would be too bad. Like, I actually, for like a brief moment there, I was really enjoying that idea. And I really wanted to go through with it. I really wanted to just put a stop to it right there and never have to feel like I'm in pain ever again. But the reality is, I couldn't do it. Well, not because it's like I couldn't go through with it. I think like had my mental state deteriorated any more than it had, I more than likely would have gone through with it. And more than likely than not, I would have probably succeeded. And it would have been just poof, done. No more. Lights goes out. Everything ends. Everything stops. Everything is over. I caught myself in two moments. The first moment of just trying to like reground myself and not let my mental health deteriorate any further than that. That was like that was hard to kind of do that. Just to like forcibly like makes myself stop thinking about it. Like I said, my sleep schedule is fucked up. My ability to like think straight and like wanting to go outside just deteriorated more and more and more. And I just never felt like I had any real resource to like fully like, ground myself and give myself like that feeling of like it's still okay for me to continue to live. It never really came to that point. But I had to fight it. I had to fight that urge. And it was very important for me, now that I look back on it, that I fought that urge. Fought that indescribable desire to like put a stop to my pain. And I was in a lot of pain. I was probably in a lot more pain than I would ever willingly admit ever in my life. But I think I was just in so much pain throughout that whole experience. And the second thing that caught me off guard and brought me back to reality was like just seeing like how many people genuinely care and worry about me, because I sort of like stopped communicating with a lot of people, and I have a lot of like family friends over here who I've hang out with and they've been pretty cool to me, but me stopping like during like my phase of like just feeling depressed and wanting to like and everything, I stopped communicating with people, and it got them genuinely worried about me to the point where they came to where I was living, my residence, and demanded to see me because they were worried like something might have happened to me. And that gave me a genuine like appreciation for like the people who care about me, and how like it made me think like how my demise, well, I don't want to say the word, but how like me like ending it all, because in that moment I don't really think about it. Like I thought about like writing messages, like time messages, and maybe like putting out maybe a similar video like this to people and like time the release of it to just being like, yeah, goodbye. I can't do it anymore. Like I genuinely contemplated doing all of that and getting all the pieces like ready, getting everything sent out so that I can leave with no regrets. But I just never really thought about like what kind of impact that would have on other people. And that genuinely brought me back from a place where I felt like nothing really mattered other than me just wanting to end my suffering. It made me really kind of like stop and appreciate like the kind of people I have in my life. Like my family life, I would say, is like 50-50. I'd say sometimes I enjoy it, other times I don't. So I'd never really have like any real emotional grounding there. But the kind of like emotional connection I've established with people who I can consider close friends, who I've now addressed my issues with and told them about my past my experience in the past few months, it just really helped me to understand like there's people that really care about me, and there's people that's going to be really sad because of my own selfish actions, like what that's going to do to them. And that allowed me to like seek out help, seek out counseling, and just seek out like advice from like a person who I consider a very close friend. Shout out to you, love. Really appreciate you for being there and for everything you do to help positively reaffirm me of like I still have some worth in my life. Like really thank you for that. And thank you to all my other friends for like being supportive of like hearing the story and like just, hearing me out. Like that's really all I can ask for the end of the day is like I want to be heard. I want people to hear what I have to say. I want to hear I want people to hear me talk about my struggles. I just want people to listen at the end of the day. They could say nothing, they could just react. That's fine. It's just nice to know that at least there's someone there to listen to me. And at least there's someone there who can give genuine, honest advice, irregardless of how I feel, and really, like, honestly, like, push me in a direction that I feel like I should be going. And yeah, now, no, I mean, now where am I at now? I really don't know. I genuinely don't know where this is going to go. I don't know if this is the right step to take, but I think I don't want to pursue higher education or be stuck in like an academic setting anymore, where I just forcibly push myself to try and to do something half-ass and just not really have anything to show for it at the end of the day. And I just bum and laze around repeating the cycle over and over again. It's a waste of my time. It's a waste of money from the people who invest in me. And it's just me wasting my life away when I clearly should be first defining what direction I should be taking and move with that. I need a solid concrete plan and a direction where I can feel like, as long as I take this path, even if there's some bumps and mishaps along the way, if I just keep a clear head and have a clear mindset and direction of how I want to be, how I want my life to be, and how, and this is important for me, how I want to be happy. I want to be happy. I really do. And I hope that, I can be happy. And I think this will be the first chapter in what will hopefully be an interesting journey towards me finding happiness. Now, once again, if any of these things I told you about, if I say once again, why am I saying once again? That's so dumb. I didn't say it the first time. So it's like, if any of these things I talk about hit a chord with you, or like you feel like you're in a similar situation and you're depressed and maybe thinking or even contemplating committing suicide, don't do it. I can say with like a lot of confidence right now, like, I don't think that's the right way out. Or at the very least, I don't feel like that's the right way out. I cannot speak for you and your experience. I don't know if anyone out there has like a similar experience, or maybe they have it worse than me. Like, I genuinely don't know. But please, if you can, seek out help. Seek out like valuable like resources that you have, potentially like maybe get some advice from someone. And honestly, ground yourself and find yourself in a place where you are surrounded by people who genuinely loves you and genuinely cares that you are there with them. I think that is more important than anything else right now. And that's the thing that's driving me forward right now, is knowing that I have people and I have friends who I can genuinely call upon and rely on, and know that whether or not they have my back, I know that they want me to be around. And for me, that's like a little piece of happiness that I should always be cherishing. And I want them to know that I really appreciate them. Like, I really appreciate them for being there for me. So yeah, that's all. Peace out.